Okay, today we're learning Yevamot Daf Lamed Tet. So here goes. A bit of a review of yesterday's daf. So what we saw was we had a Mishnah. The Mishnah had two parts. Shomer Yabam Shenaflula Nechasim. If when she's in the status of waiting for her Yabam to do Yibum or Chalitza, she gets a gift, okay, or inheritance. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel both agree, even though they have a machloket, if it were to fall when she was betrothed to someone. When it comes to Shomer Yabam, they don't have a machloket at all, and they all agree that she has full rights to it. She could sell it as she pleases. But if she dies in that period, then they have a machloket, and it depends on which type of possession. So Beit Shammai seems to be saying, and we're going to change this today, but he seems to be saying, it says Meta, if she dies, Maya se b'ktubata, which is her ktuba, the tosefet, the additional money in the ktuba, and the nichsei tzon barzel that she puts down in the ktuba. What happens with those? And we assume that means the nichsei malog, the heirlooms she came with, that are supposed to go in with her and come out with her exactly as they were. So what happens with all those? Beit Shammai says, Yachloku Yorshei Abal im Yorshei Av. The Yorshei Abal split it with the Yorshei Abba, meaning the family and the potential Yabam, they split all that stuff. Beit Hillel says, Nechasim b'ches katan. So the ktuba is in the hands of the husband, meaning the Yabam, potential Yabam. And when it comes to the nichsei malug, the heirloom type things, they're in the possession of the father's family, the wife's family, and they get that. So they have this big machloket. The Gemara asked right away, what's the deal here? Why is there a difference between the two cases? Like the simple reading is the difference is she's alive or dead. And that was the explanation that Rabbi gave, because Ula gave the first explanation and said, well, it was a matter of whether she was engaged to the first husband and then fell to Yibum from engagement, or she was married to the first husband and fell to him from marriage, right? And then he basically said, we're going to treat a suffix arusa like an arusa like if she was from Averson. We're going to treat her like a suffix arusa. That's the connection of Zika, right? Because she has Zika from Erusin, she's like a suffix arusa. Suffix arusa already, everyone's going to agree it's no problem. She gets to have all the rights. But if she fell from marriage to the Yabam, then it's suffix nisua, and then we're going to already be more stringent. And then we're really trying, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure why, but all these opinions are trying to explain Beit Shammai. Why Beit Shammai says Yachloku. And the point is, since it came from marriage, so we're going to split it 50-50. Came Rabbanit, he said, what are you talking about? If it was going to be that, it should have said in the Mishnah, two cases of her alive, one when she fell from engagement, one when she fell from marriage. It should have no difference whether she dies or not, and we're talking about her inheritors, or whether we're talking about her herself and who gets the produce from those fields, is it, or whatever it might be. So Rabbi doesn't like that explanation. Rabbi gives his own explanation. Rabbi says, no, the difference is obvious. It's meta. Either she's alive or she's dead. If she's alive, she has a stronger chazaka when she's alive to the money because she's there. Once she dies, those who inherit her already have a weaker claim than she would have had herself. And that's why when she's alive, she's muchzeket in the property that she just gained. So she's going to be able to take it according to everybody, sell it if she wants. But once she dies and there's Zika to this Yabam, well, then already the claim of the people who inherit her is already going to be weaker than her herself, and therefore they're going to have an argument about it. Now, you might be saying it's a bit of a weak claim, and that's exactly why there's going to be different opinions here, because it's not so clear-cut that they have any weaker claim than she does, and if it was so obvious, we wouldn't have four explanations of this Mishnah. Where do we leave off? Abaye came in question that according to this, what we're basically saying is that they split it when she dies. Now, what's the problem? The problem is Beit Hillel says it stays in whoever's possession it was in, right? So the stuff that was more in the possession of the Yabam stays with the Yabam. Stuff that was more in possession of the family stays with the family. So why does Beit Shammai think that Yachloku in this case? He's basically saying, Safek Motzi Migev, right? He's basically saying, in the case where she's alive, right? Yachloku, we're just saying it's suffix and suffix. In the first case, she's vadai because it was her, she got it. The Yabam is only a suffix because he's got Zika, and she gets everything. Comes Abaye and says, wait a minute, who says she gets everything according to Beit Shammai? Beit Shammai elsewhere seems to say, even if there's a suffix claim and a vadai claim, right? Someone's definite, someone's suffix. The suffix gets something. In fact, in the case we saw with the house that fell, the suffix got 50%. So why in this case does the suffix not get 50%? That's in the Reisha part where she gets everything. So we answered there that it's shtar ha'omed legavot kekavoy dami. There we were talking about a Baal Chov who had a document that said, you owe me money. He gets even in a suffix claim because he has a document to show for it. And then they said, where do we learn it from? We learn it from the Sota case. And the Gemara asked, so this is the last thing we did yesterday. If they learn it from the Sota case, and the Sota case has the same issue with the Ketubah there, that she can claim her Ketubah, even though it's a suffix, we don't know whether she was a Sota or not. This is when the husband dies before she drinks the waters. Why didn't Abai ask that question on Rabbah from the Sota case? So we said, Ketubah is a unique law because sometimes we give more power to a woman to collect her Ketubah money because we want to make sure she gets married and she has this protection. So, okay, that's where we ended. So now we're going to start inside, 8 lines from the bottom of Lamed Chet Amud Bet. V'lotve Ketubah dematnitin. Another question Abai could have questioned Rabbah with. What about the Ketubah in our Mishnah? And this is where, if you remember, it says, they're going to say, right, in a second, they're going to quote it, which is, Meta, ma yaseh b'ktubata, u'b'nechasim ha'nechnasim v'yotzim mimah, Beit Shammai omrim yachloku. Here we have a case again where someone is muchzak. Who's muchzak? The husband, right? The yabam, the potential yabam. He has more rights to the ketubah money than she does. Because again, the ketubah money is only going to be hers if he dies first. But in this case, she died. So he's got the money. And yet, so he's got a more vadai claim. The family of the woman has a suffix claim, and yet it says yachloku, they split it 50-50. So that would be another good question Abai could have asked Rabbah, which is, Beit Shammai doesn't hold suffix, in suffix motzimi de vadai, because look here, yachloku, even though it's suffix. So why didn't he ask from there? To which the Gemara answers, lo pligi. Beit Shammai doesn't disagree in that case. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? He doesn't disagree. It says he disagrees. Below, v'aktane, it says in the Mishnah, meta, ma yaseh b'ktubata. What does he do with the ketubah money, with the nechsei malug money? And then what does it say? Seems pretty clear. He disagrees. To which they're going to reread the Mishnah now. Hachi kamar. This is what it says. Meta. This is how you should read the Mishnah. Meta maya sebek. They ask the question about both, but Beit Shammai only answers about one. Maya sebek chubata. Vishavka, and he leaves off the question. He doesn't answer that question. When it comes to the nechsei malug, there we say they split it 50-50. Which means now, not what we thought before. Means we keep them in the hands of the original owner, which the truth is it really does mean, because in both cases we're going to leave them b'ches katan. It's just Beit Shammai would probably agree with Beit Hillel in the case of the ketubah, that it stays with the Baal, with the Yabam. Rav Ashi, Manitinami Daika, we can actually prove this reading from the wording of the Mishnah. To Katani, notice what it says there. Yachloku Yorshei Habal im Yorshei Ha'av. What does that mean literally? It means the inheritors of the husband, which means the Yabam, will split it with, and now really what it means here with is from the Yorshim of the father, meaning basically the money is in the power of the family and the Yabam is going to be able to take the money from within. That's what it means Yorshei Habal, do it with the Yorshei Ha'av, meaning the Yorshei Ha'av are the ones that have chazaka on it. Now, what do they have a chazaka on? Only the nechsei malug, the heirlooms, not on the other stuff. So that's the proof that Beit Shammai is really only talking about the second case. And the fact it doesn't say Loktani Yorshei Ha'avim Yorshei Habal, Shmamina, because it would have said then that the family gets some of the portion of the husband. It doesn't say it that way, which means it must be referring to the ones that the family is muchzak in, that they have more claims to. Okay, so therefore we now reinterpret, in order to explain why Abai didn't use that as a question on Rabbah, we reinterpreted the Mishnah. Now, Abai, or after he asked all his questions on Rabbah, and this is the structure in general, right? We had Ula, Rabbah asked a question on Ula and then gave his own interpretation. Abai asked a question on Rabbah and gives his own interpretation. Rabbah is now later going to ask a question on Abai and then bring his own interpretation. So we're up to interpretation number 3. Abai Amar, Reisha denaflula k'shi shomeret yabam, Sefer denaflula k'shi tachtav debal. The first part was talking about when did she get the money? She got the inheritance when she was a shomeret yabam. That's what Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel all agree, because right, that's already Safek Arusa, and right, she's not even Safek, right? She's nothing really. She's just got Zika, and that's not strong enough to have him inherit her property. But Seifa, when we have Beit Shammai saying Yachloku, why does he have rights to it in the second part? Because we're talking about things that she got when she was still married to her original husband. Naflulak she tachtav debal, and therefore he has rights to them. Okay, because they were already hers from before. Because when they fall to her in marriage, they're obviously the husband has rights to them. It's just when they fell, when she was in this Zika stage where she's not exactly connected to the next husband, then already we're not going to give it significance. And they add, and they don't really add enough here to explain, but Rashi helps understand what this means. Kasavar Abai Yado Ki Yada. Abai holds, now, even though we've been talking all about Beit Shammai, now he's explaining Beit Hillel and then the machloka between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, which is Yado Ki Yada. Beit Hillel agrees that Yado Ki Yada, so I don't know, okay, in the Seifa, for sure there's a machloka Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, okay? That's why, and that's, again, what's the machloka? Let me make it really, really clear. The Reisha, everyone agrees she can buy and sell as she pleases. The Seifa, which we've been trying to explain most of the time, really why Beit Shammai says Yachloku. What rights, on what basis does Beit Shammai say that the husband, this potential Yabam, who's not yet her husband, gets rights to something? Well, that's because we're talking about property that were already in her possession, were already in his possession or his brother's possession from the previous marriage. And therefore, he already does have rights to them because he's the potential Yabam. Okay, Beit Hillel disagrees and thinks it's not Yachloku. It's that whoever the money is in their possession, they get it, meaning whoever's muhzak. What does it mean, muhzak? It's the status quo argument, is what Beit Hillel says, which means if it fell to the husband when she was still married to him, and now she falls to the Yabam to marry her, so it's still, the ketubah money is all money she's only going to get if this husband dies. So the money is in his possession because he basically will inherit his brother, and that money will stay with him until such point that he dies or divorces her. So that's bechezkato. The nichse melug, which were the things she brought in from her family, heirloom, things like that. Those are more in the domain of the parents and her family, and they get those. That's what Beit Hillel says. So there is a machloka Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. So now what's the machloka based on? So kasavar abai yado ki yada. He says the hand of the husband is like the hand of the wife. What does this mean? This means what power, and now we're not talking about a yabam, we're talking about the husband. What power does the husband have? How much power does he have over her property when he's married to her? Is it equal? Okay, because she's got the Karen, right, the base. He's got the produce. So do we say that's about equal? Or do we say, since he's got access to the produce, he's got more power in the stuff that would be Yado is stronger than Yada. He's got more control over the property because in the end, he's the one who's dealing with it and he's the one who gets all the produce, etc. So there's a machloket about it. So Beit Hillel holds it's the same. Now, where does this go to us? If it's the same, what happens? If it's the same, then when she falls to the Yabam's power is always going to be less than the husband. Whatever the husband has, it goes down a level. So if you say they were equal, right, when the Nechasim fell to her in marriage, then comes in the Yabam, because the husband dies, the Yabam has less power. That's why the woman is going to, now, this is why the woman is going, or basically we're going to say the money stays where it is, because he doesn't have as much power as her. So if they're already in his possession, he keeps them. But her Nichse Melug, he's got no power with them. They go right to the woman's family because, okay, that's Beit Hillel. We're going to say Yadoki Yadas, so the Yabam goes down a little. If you say that his Yad is stronger than hers because he has control over the produce, then basically the Yabam is going to drop a level and they're going to be equal at this point. If they're equal, that's Beit Shammai, Yachloku. Okay? So that's what it means when it says Kasavar Abai Yadoki Yada. It means of the husband according to Beit Hillel. And then that would affect, Beit Shammai obviously disagrees with that. So now, Amalei Rava. Here comes Rava's problem with Abai's explanation. Okay, again, Abai's explanation is, did the money fall to her when she was in this in-between stage, or did it fall to her from before? If it fell to her from before, he's going to obviously have more rights to it. So Amalei Rava, Enough, Leila, because you have to remember the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa is everyone agrees on the Reisha. She's got all rights to it. She can sell it as she pleases. There's a machloket in the Seifa, but the gist of the machloket is that even though they have a debate about who gets what, it's still clear that there's more power to the husband than there was to in the first case. So Amarle Rav, Idenaf Leila kashi tachtav debal. If they fell to her when she was under her husband's domain, everyone's going to say his yad is stronger than hers because the money fell to her when she was in his domain. He already gets rights to it and he has rights to the produce. Everyone thinks he's stronger than her. Ella, and therefore he disagrees with what Abaye just said because there's no machloket, he says. It's obvious that that's the case. And Beit Hillel wouldn't say yadoki yada. So on that basis, he comes up with a different explanation. Ella idi v'idi, so he says, okay, clearly, both the Reisha and the Seifa, and he's not yet saying what the difference is. First, he's saying what's similar about them. Okay, it's as we thought originally. The money fell to her when she was at this in-between stage. So what's the difference? All of a sudden, what are we going to introduce? Another machloka Beit Shammai Beit Hillel we already know about. Remember, we had a whole machloka between them, the status of ma'amal, how strong is ma'amal? Remember, Beit Shammai says it's koneh kinyan gamol or koneh partial kinyan, and we had a whole debate about how strong does Beit Shammai think Zika is, and ma'amar, Zika with ma'amar, how strong is it? So that's what we're going to say this machloket is. Reisha delo aviv ma'amar. The first case is a regular yabam. He didn't do ma'amar with her. Seifa de aviv ma'amar. In the Seifa case, when already he gets more rights to it, right? In the beginning, he doesn't have any rights because they didn't have any relationship. Yes, she's supposed to do yibum with him, but they haven't done anything yet. So any property she gets is all hers. But in the Seifa, it's that they did ma'amar already. So they're somewhat married. Remember, on a rabbinic level, they're married. And remember, the Beit Shammai thinks that this is very serious. So, Kasava Rava, ma'amar leBeit Shammai oseh vadai arusa usafek nesua. Okay, he makes this statement that we didn't see this before. But what does ma'amar to Beit Shammai do? It means that she's definitely engaged, okay? Because that's what we said in general. Beit Shammai thinks ma'amar is like betrothal. She's definitely betrothed. And she's safek nesua. She's even more than just a betrothal. She's now possibly married already. So what does it mean? In what way is she vadai arusa and in what way is she safek nesua? Remember, in arusa, if she's engaged, Beit Shammai doesn't think that he gets rights to her possessions. So if Beit Shammai thinks she's vadai arusa, that's not going to help with the possessions. So that's why he needs to add the safek nesua, okay? Because that's going to be why he gets half the property. So vadai arusa litchot b'tzara. Okay, this was the whole Beit Shammai thing. Remember when Rabbi Elazar had said the only thing the Beit Shammai meant when it's koneh kinyan gamor means to push off her tzara. That means if I'm a woman and I did ma'amar already with this yabam, and then my sister felt like two of us were married to two brothers. My husband died. I did ma'amar with his brother. Third brother dies. His wife needs to do yibum with him, but I did ma'amar already, right? Normally we say, if it's two sisters, both of them are exempt. In this case, what happens? I did ma'amar already. My sister becomes exempt immediately, but I can still, I can still marry him because I already did ma'amar. So the power of ma'amar, according to Beit Shammai, is to push off my tzara. Remember, other people said both of us have to do chalitza. None of us can marry because we have Zika, both of us. Beit Shammai had said, if I already did ma'amar, that's strong enough to connect me to him and exempt my tzara. And she doesn't even have to do chalitza. Okay, so that's what he means by vadai arusa. Safek nesua means that he can already get half the possessions. Lachlok b'nechasim. And that's explaining Beit Shammai. So now they say, Itmar mishmei de Rabbi Elazar kavatei de Rava. They say that Rabbi Elazar held like Rava. And Itmar mishmei de Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina kavatei de Abai. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina held like Abai. So now they say, wait a minute. Umiyamar Rabbi Elazar hachi. Remember, he was the one I just said the whole thing about ma'amal. What did he say? Hamar Rabbi Elazar, ma'amar leBeit Shammai eina koneh ela lidchot b'tzara bilvad. Remember, he said that was the famous line that Rabbi Elazar said. It doesn't do as much as you think it does. It only means that the tzara is exempt, which seems to imply it doesn't mean that he gets to split the property 50-50. So how do we reconcile that with the fact that Rabbi Elazar holds like Rava, which seems to indicate that ma'amar is koneh leBeit Shammai for other things as well? So either option number one, ipuch. Obviously, whoever said Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina held like Abai and Rabbi Elazar held like Rava was mistaken and it's flipped. Okay, that's answer number one. You could explain it. You don't have to flip them. Amar l'cha Rabbi Elazar, he would explain. What I meant to say is the ma'amar is not strong enough only to push off the tzara. What I meant to say is, don't think that if you did ma'amar and then you decide not to do yibum, that since you did ma'amar and it's koneh kinyan gamur, then what does that mean? It basically means you're on the track of marriage and not yibum anymore. And then if you decide you don't want to marry her, all you have to do is give her a get and not chalitza. He says, no. What I'm saying is ma'amar is only koneh litchot b'tzara, but you still need to do, number one, you need to get out of the ma'amar, and you're also going to have to do chalitza because you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah yet. So that's what he meant when he said that. But he wasn't relating to property issues. That wasn't the topic of what he was discussing. When he said it's only docheles tzara, what he meant was, but it wasn't like you fulfilled your mitzvah of yibum already, and if you want to get out of it, all you need is a get. No, you need chalitza also. So, but it wasn't relating at all to property. So you could say, maybe he said, and yes, also for property, you would split the property. Okay, so we mainly seem to be focusing on Abai and Rava's interpretation right now, which is he side like him, and this has to do, according to Rava, with this big machloket about ma'amal and what Beit Shammai holds about ma'amal. I see you're asking, can you skip again and just do chalitza? No. You have to do get and chalitza because ma'amar is like kiddushin, so you need a get to get out of it, and you need chalitza. Amar Rav Papa. Now Rav Papa's we're almost done with this whole section. Rav Papa says, diyuka demanitin kavatei da abayi. Va'afagav de kasha beta. Okay, he says something kind of one thing in the opposite. He says the Mishnah seems to go like Abaye, except for the meta, the fact that it says, and if she dies. So, how so? So, how is it like the Mishnah? And what's the problem with meta? And how is it like Abaye? And how is it like Dekatane nichasim hanichnesim v'yotzim ima? Remember what Abaye said. There's ones that came into her that fell to her through marriage, right? When she was still married. They fell to her when she was married to her original husband. And now the question is, what rights does the Yabam have? So he says, look at the wording. Nichasim hanichnesim v'yotzim ima. My nichnesim u'ma yotzim. What does it mean? They went in and come out with her. Lav nechnesim l'reshut habal v'yotzim l'reshut habal l'reshut ha'av. Does it not mean things that came in to the possession of her husband, meaning when she was still married to the original husband? And then they go out from the reshut habal and they go back to her father. Is that not, seems like what Abai is saying? But what's the problem with meta? This is the exact same question they asked on Ula, which is Abai's explanation gives no understanding at all of why the second case was she dies. Because theoretically, they could have given a case where she was alive if the whole difference is when did the property fall into her possession? She was alive when she was married to the first husband or after the first husband died and she's in this in-between stage. That has nothing to do with her dying. It could have given a more simple case of when she's alive and before and after, and we're talking about the payroll and the proceeds, who gets the proceeds. So, or the produce. So anyway, right, therefore, that's difficult. And then the sugya kind of has a very interesting ending, which happens once in a while. Vitulo midi. We have nothing else to say about this topic. Okay, we've already covered it very well. We've talked about all the different things, and we have no more to say. Okay, with that, we're going to move on. If he marries her, she now becomes his wife for all intents and purposes. So now what we have to understand is what are the intents and purposes. What is this Mishnah telling us? For what halachic issue is this? It's to tell you, number one, if he wants to divorce her, he needs to give her a get. Number two, he can return her from a divorce. Okay, if he divorces her, he can remarry her if he wants. So Gemara says, wait a minute. Megarsha beget pshita. Of course, he gives her a get. How else do you get out of a marriage? So they give an interesting thing you might have thought. Says he takes her to a wife and he does yibum. So now, what's the undoing of yibum? Chalitza. So what might you have thought? Amar Rachmana, right? The pasuk says this. What's it teaching you? Yibma, that she's still kind of connected to her first husband. When she's in this new marriage, she still has she's fulfilling the first husband's things going on, right? That's what's happening. So bechalitza in beget lo. You might say then, in order for her to get out of this relationship, since it's like it's a yibum relationship, maybe you get out of it by doing chalitza and not get. Kamash malan, no, it's clear you give her a get, and you don't need chalitza, obviously. Right? You only need chalitza when it's ma'amal, when you didn't actually finish the marriage. But when you actually married her, you only need get. Machzira, the fact that you can remarry her after you divorce her, again, pshita, once she's your wife, what's the difference? Well, Sakadat Hachamina, and this one I would think you might really think, which is mitzvah derami rachmana ale avda. He already fulfilled the mitzvah of the Torah by marrying her the first time. Now we know he doesn't need to divorce her right away. Right? It's not like we say, okay, you did your mitzvah, you have a child now, separate. But let's say he does divorce her, and now he decides, I want to remarry her. You might have thought, since you fulfilled your mitzvah, and now you ended that relationship, maybe you revert back to being forbidden to her because of Esharach, like we've been discussing all along. Kamash malan, that no. Once he marries her and does yibum, he's on a marriage track. The whole Yisroach the Esharach will never come back. Okay? She will never, ever be forbidden to him anymore because, right, they now have a new relationship and it kind of disconnects from the first. You sort of say, well, why do you say that? Maybe she shouldn't be allowed to remarry him. Maybe that it makes a lot of sense to say it goes back to Isur Esharach because you really already fulfilled the mitzvah. There's no reason. Amar Kra, Pasuk says, Lekachalo liisha. They now learn from the part Lekachalo liisha, she becomes his wife for all intents and purposes, and that's why he's allowed to remarry her if he wants. Now, the last part of the Mishnah was Ubavad shetei ktubata shel ba'ala harishon. We're going to have to understand what exactly this means. So remember, she gets her ketubah from her first husband. He dies. Normally, she's supposed to get the ketubah money, but in this case, she does yibum, so she doesn't get the ketubah money yet. She does yibum with the brother. He gets the possessions of the first husband, and now the ketubah, he doesn't write her a new ketubah. The ketubah of the first husband remains, okay? And he doesn't have to promise her any ketubah money. What will happen is if he dies first or divorces her, she'll get the ketubah money from the first husband. Now you might say, what's the difference? Because all the first husband's money is his. So what does it matter if it's his or hers? So it's very important. Ketubah, when you get a ketubah, a woman gets a ketubah, all property that the husband owns at the time is what we call mishuabad to the loan. That means there's a lien on his property. So if he sells it, she can go take it from anyone he sold it to. Now, we're going to learn a lot more about this later. But in this case, when she marries the second guy, she does yibum, his property is not liened to the ketubah. Only the first husband's property is liened. Okay, so anything he inherits from the first husband, that property, if he were to sell, she could take it from there. But his property he owns not. Unless, we'll see in a minute, if the husband has no money. If he has no property, then he'll have to be responsible. That we'll see in a second. So my time, what's the reason? This is an interesting one. It wasn't his doing. It kind of fell upon him that he had to do this. So we don't make him give her ketubah from his own money. But if there is no money, the husband died without any possessions, they do give her a ketubah from the second one. One of the reasons they give a ketubah, we don't want the husband to easily divorce his wife. And if he knows he has to pay her a lot of money, so he's not going to easily divorce her. So basically, in that case, we make him commit. There has to be some sort of money committed, either from the first husband's property, which is now his property, and then also it'll be a loss for him. Or if there is none, then his property will have to be liened to the ketubah so that he doesn't just take her lightly, right? And for those who say, right, this is another indication of protection of women that they instituted. Okay, new Mishnah. Mitzvah b'gadol yaben. Okay, who ideally should do yibum? We're going to get into all sorts of interesting questions now about who ideally should do yibum. Is chalitza better than yibum? Is yibum better than chalitza? Questions that we've been kind of wondering all along. Here, our sugya gets to it. So, better for the oldest to do yibum. Lo ratzam alchina kol achim. If he doesn't want, they go down the line of all the brothers. Lo ratzu. If they don't want, chazrin etz gadol v'omrim lo alecha mitzvah o chalos o yabim. Beit Din comes and says, listen, nobody else in your family want to do it. You got to do it either to chalitza or yibum. If they said, let's wait till this younger kid gets older, or the oldest one was abroad, and they said, let's wait till he gets home, or there was someone deaf or not of sane mind, and they figured, well, let's wait till he gets healed. So All those cases, they don't listen to the brother who's trying to push it off and push it on someone else, right? Procrastinated. Oh, let someone else do it. No. You do it right away. So even if the oldest one isn't there, they go to the second one. Itmar. Now we have a machloket. We're going to have two versions of this machloket. The first version is going to end in Amud Aleph, and the second version is going to start at the very beginning of Amud Bet. Biat katan v'chalitzat gadol. Pligi bar Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. There was clearly a machloket between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan about something we're not sure what. The first one says the machloket is about if the youngest will do yibum or the oldest will do chalitza only. Is it better to do chalitza with the oldest? Right. This is going to be one of these games of we have this issue, we have that issue, we have that. What if they're all conflicting? Is it better for the younger to do yibum or the older one to do the mitzvah and just do it with chalitza? So Manda Amar, so obviously there's a machloket. Chad Amar chalitzat katan adifa. Chad Amar biat katan adifa. One said better the youngest, do yibum, and Chad Amar chalitzat gadol adifa. Better the oldest, do chalitza. Manda Amar biat katan adifa da mitzvah b'yibum. The one who said better the youngest because mitzvah is yibum. Manda Amar chalitzat gadol adifa b'mkom gadol biat katan lav chlumu. Again, the oldest is responsible, so he should do it. The yibum is only important in so much as the oldest one's not dealing with it. But if the oldest one can do chalitza, that's better. So now we're going to try to prove one of the sides from our Mishnah. We're going to try from two parts of our Mishnah. It says, lo ratza mechazrin al kol achim. Now, what does it mean, lo ratza? If the oldest one didn't want to do it, they go down the line. My lo ratza liyabeim ela lachlotz, right? Is it not that he didn't want to do yibum, he wanted to do chalitza, but he didn't want to do yibum, and then they say, okay, let's go to the next, Let's first go through them all and see if they want to do yibum. If not, we'll start with chalitza again. So that's how they first read the Mishnah, which obviously means, right? From there you see Shmami Nabi Katan Adifa. They'd rather have yibum of a younger one than the oldest one doing chalitza. By the way, katan here doesn't mean katan, a minor. Katan means over 13, just the younger in the family. So they say, no, what it meant is the oldest didn't want to do chalitza or yibum. And then they go down the line. Nobody wants to do chalitza or yibum. In the end, they go back to the oldest one and say, you have no choice. So then they say, right? It must be all down the line. Nobody wanted to do either one. So when they go back and they say you have to do chalitza, why did they go to the oldest one? Theoretically, right? They went to him to force him. In that sense, once no one was doing yibum, they could have forced anybody. So I don't really like your explanation. They said, no. No. Still makes sense that they force the oldest to do the chalitza because really the mitzvah was upon him. So if they're going to force one person, again, they're going to force the oldest. Tanan, second attempt to prove from our Mishnah one of the answers. If we wait for the youngest till he gets older, right? We say, let's wait till he gets older. We don't allow that. Now, if none of the brothers want to do chalitza, we should maybe wait for the katan till he gets older because adif, we do better to do yibum. So, ninter dilma gadol, right? Dilma gadol, why don't we wait till he gets older and then he'll do yibum? So they say, no, that's not a good answer. According to you, we don't wait for the older one to come from abroad, even though it's obviously a better mitzvah for the older one to do it. Why don't we wait till he comes and does chalitza? Ella. What's the reason for that halacha? Something other reason. This is why I said there's all kinds of things pulling. Yes, maybe biat katan is adifa, but kol shihuye mitzvah lo mashina. If we don't want to push off a mitzvah, that's why I said procrastinators, right? We don't want to push off a mitzvah. That's why that whole second part has nothing to do with what's ideal, because again, that might be ideal that we want the katan, but if he's too young and we have to wait for him, then it already, the points of how valuable this is goes down. Starting from Amud. Some people say, everybody agrees when it comes to biat katan, better to do yibum, okay? Even if he's the younger one in the family. But ki pligi b'chalitzat katan, the machloket is the chalitza of the katan, meaning if nobody does yibum, then are we better off having the older one do chalitza? Or at this point, it's only yibum we want the oldest one to do. When it comes to chalitza, everybody's equal. That's what we're going to read right now. Hachi itmar, chalitzat katan v'chalitzat gadol. So here's the machloket between them. This is a different version of the machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Pligi bar Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chad amar chalitzat gadol adifa. One says, better the oldest one do the chalitza. V'chad amar ki adad einenu. And the other one says, no, they're equal. So now, here we're going to have the exact same structure as before. We're going to explain why each one says what they said. And then we're going to try to prove it from the same lines in our Mishnah, proving one of the sides or the other. And in the end, we're not going to be successful like we weren't in the first version. So Manda Amar Chalitzat Gadol Adifa Deha Mitzvah Begadol. Because again, whole mitzvah is in the Gadol. This, by the way, affects, we've talked about this before, whether we view Chalitza as a mitzvah or not. Is Chalitza a mitzvah, or is it a way to be exempt from the mitzvah? So if you view it as a way to be exempt from the mitzvah, then it really shouldn't matter if the older one does it or the younger one. If you view Chalitza itself as a mitzvah, then it would make sense to say if the mitzvah is in the oldest, well, then maybe Chalitza would be in the oldest as well. So it could be, I'm not saying for sure, it could be this machloket connects with that issue that we discussed previously. So Manda Amar, v'idach ki amrina mitzvah b'gadol inyan yibum, aval inyan chalitza k'adadinu. When they said mitzvah b'gadol, that's only yibum. But when it comes to chalitza, it doesn't really make a difference. Tanan. So again, let's try to prove it from our Mishnah. Again, they're going to read it in a particular way, and then they're going to change the reading. Lo ratzu, if they didn't want to do the mitzvah, again, we don't know what, to fill in the blank, if they didn't want to do yibum, or they didn't want to do yibum or chalitza. So let's see which one they choose now. Chozrin etzel gadol. My love, lo ratzu li'abeim ela lachlotz. Is it not, they didn't want to do yibum, but they were willing to do chalitza. This is the exact same way we read it the first reading. And then what do you see here? V'katani chozrin etzel gadol. So what do you see here? They went through the list. Nobody wanted to do yibum. Now they go through again. They start from the oldest and having to do chalitza. Clearly, it's because mitzvah b'gadol, right? Chalitza gadol adifa. So then they say, lo. You don't have to explain it that way. Lo ratzu lo lachlot v'lo liyabim. They didn't want to do yibum or chalitza. Gadol lo ratza lo lachlot v'lo liat. So now they say, right. So that's already the answer. No one wanted to do chalitza or yibum, and then they just go back to the older one to do chalitza. So then obviously the same question is asked as before. So wait a minute. Again, once no one's willing to do chalitza, then they just need to force somebody. They could force anybody. Why specifically the oldest? So again, they answer, no, again, he's the one who the original mitzvah of yibum fell upon him. So therefore, they go back to him for chalitza. But it doesn't mean that the chalitza of the gadol is better. It's just, if we're going to pick one, we're going to pick him because he was the one who was supposed to do yibum. So that didn't prove anything. Tashma, let's learn from the second part. If you want to wait for the gadol to come back from abroad, we don't listen. Right? If better to do chalitza with the oldest, so let's wait till he comes home to do chalitza. So then they say, according to what you're saying, katan ad she'yagdil ein shomim lo. They're doing the mirror of what we did the first time, where first we brought the katan, and then we said, well, you can prove for the gadol that that's not the issue, and that the issue is something else. So the same thing here. Why are you not going to listen for the? Why are you not going to wait for the katan? Amai ninter dilma gadil umiyabe. We already said that according to this, everybody agrees that better the katan do yibum if he would. So if nobody wants to do chalitza, and there's one little kid left, and he's a minor, why don't you wait till he gets older and maybe he'll do yibum, if that's ideal? So again, there's ideal, but then there's some other ideal that's pulling us in the other direction. We never push off a mitzvah, and that's why we don't wait for this minor to get older, and that's why we don't wait for the older one, even though ideally he should be doing chalitza, we still don't wait if he went abroad because we don't want to push off the mitzvah. And obviously, you have to remember exactly, I see you're saying that in the chat, which is, it would obviously keep the woman stuck for a much longer period of time. And she can't get married this whole time. So it's another motivation why they don't want to push this off. Tanan Hatam. Now we're going to quote a Mishnah that appears in Bechorot. Okay. And it's a Mishnah that says, Mitzvat yibum kodemet lemitzvat chalitza. Okay. Now we finally get to what's the ideal. So we're going to find something very interesting. Mitzvat yibum is better than chalitza. Okay. That makes sense from the way the Torah describes it, right? Your Mekim Shem Amet, all that. But Barishona, Shayu Mitkavnim L'Shem Mitzvah. That was all originally when people did this for the right reasons. Okay, we're going to talk about all this. What does it mean for the right reasons? People married their brothers' wives to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of yibum. Achshav She'em Mitkavnim L'Shem Mitzvah, which we'll see soon means they had eyes for her. They were interested in her. She was pretty. Whatever reason. And that's considered not the right reason, which is fascinating because to think he's only doing it for the mitzvah means he doesn't really want to marry her and he's doing it what kind of marriage is that going to be, right? It's a little bit strange, hard to understand exactly, but I'm going to talk about this a little more soon. But now that people are no longer doing it, l'shem mitzvah, amru mitzvat chalitza kodemet mitzvat yibum. Then they changed it. They said, you know what? People aren't doing this for the right reasons. Better to have chalitza. And yes, I see you're writing, which is maybe he's doing it for the money, right? Because he gets his brother's possessions. It's also another motivation. So Amarav ain kofim. Rav says, despite the fact that chalitza is ideal, we don't force people to do chalitza. If they want to do yibum, let them do yibum. Ki ata the kamei Rav. When people came before Rav and they wanted to know why, Amar lahu ibai chalitz ibai yadin. When people came to him and said, we have this thing in front of us, he said they could do whatever they want. B'didach tali rachmana, because the Torah basically put it up to you, right? A guy comes, he says, I'm supposed to do, what should I do? So it's all up to you. That's what the Torah said. Im lo yachpotz ha'ish, ha'im chafetz ibai chalitz ibai yibim. If the man doesn't want to, he does chalitza. But if he does, right, he can choose whatever he wants. So obviously the woman has to agree. Remember, that was at the Rabbi's Institute. She also has to agree to want to marry him. But she is a part of it, but they're focusing on his obligation right now. The Af Rav Yehuda Savar Ein Kofim. Rav Yehuda also said, we don't force him. How do we know this? Ask him, Rav Yehuda begita de chalitza. Gita is not get necessarily. Gita is any document. So the star of chalitza, it means, okay? The document of chalitza, this was his wording, and you're going to see from his wording that the man has a choice. Okay, this woman brought this person to the court to do the mitzvah, and it became clear to us, became known to us. We're going to have to see how exactly. He is the brother of the guy who died through the father, because that's the only way you do yibum. The amrele, and then we said to him, "Eat sevet liyabim yabim." This is the important part. If you want to do yibum, do yibum. V'ilo, itala rigla diamina. If not, give us your right foot. Itala rigla diamina. He gave him the right foot because, right, they're writing what happened because this is a shtar chalitza. Obviously, they didn't do yibum. Usharet sinem al ragloi. She took his shoe off his foot. V'yarach ba'on poi, and she spit in front of him. Roka, saliva. Timitchaze lebeidina al ara. They saw it, and they saw it go on the ground. For Rabbi Chia bar Avia Messiah bar Mishmei Rav Yehuda, he would finish off the shtar with the words "Va'akrinu ma'dechti b'sefer," right to demotion. He said in the Rav Yehuda also that we finish with the words, and this is as it says in the Sefer Torah. I'm sorry, and we read before him the part that it says in the Torah, right, which is this is what you do. The man who doesn't right, etc. So now the Gemara says, "Ishtamodinu pliga barav acha baravina." What kind of proof do we need that he's the brother through the father? Chanamar be'edim. One says you need witnesses, legitimate witnesses. B'chanamar afilu karov afilu isha. This is just to identify him. You don't need real testimony. You can have even a woman. It's usually not acceptable. Even a relative. Sounds like even one witness. Can be any kind of witness that normally isn't accepted is accepted here because it's really just trying to establish facts on the ground. Now we're going back to that really interesting line. So now we have to understand this whole thing. So first of all, before we understand it, Rami Bar Chama says they changed it yet again. And at a later point, they said mitzvah yibum is better before chalitza, do yibum. So what? There was the generations got better. Usually it's always yiridat Torah, right? The subsequent generations get worse. So he said, no, that's not why we changed it. Originally, they held like Abba Shaul. After that, they changed their minds. What's Abba Shaul and Rabbanan? Detanya. Abba Shaul omer, hakoneset yivimto l'shem noi u'l'shem ishut u'l'shem davar acher ki'ilu pogea be'erva v'karov ani be'enai liyot havla mamzer. If you marry your brother's wife to do yibum because she's pretty, because you want to be married to her, maybe it didn't say this, but because of the money, right? So basically, number one, you're getting close to erva, and I almost want to call your kids mamzerim, okay? The kids that are going to be born from this union, because really you're marrying Esharach. We only allow for the purposes of the mitzvah, and you have some ulterior motive, right? It's like you're doing erva. Chachamim omrim Yevamot yavo aleh b'kol makom. He says it's very general in the Torah. Yevamot yavo aleh, any case, any reason, anything, it doesn't matter. Okay? So that's what he says. We changed the psak, which is very interesting also. Originally, they thought like Abba Shaul, then they changed their minds. Said you can marry for any reason, and that put Yibum back up at the top. So we're going to end with this Braita It's going to be discussed more if you listen to tomorrow's daf in advance because of Pesach. So now you'll understand it better after we learn this, which is we're now going to bring a braita in tomorrow's daf. We're going to bring a parallel braita with the same language in a different topic, and we're going to try to compare the two ways we have of reading this braita. So who's the author of this braita? Man tana lahadetanu Rabbanan. Yevamot yavo aleha mitzvah. Okay, we're not going to understand it just yet. Then we're going to read two readings of it, one according to Abba Shaul, one according to the rabbis, and with that we'll finish. Yevamot yavo aleha is a mitzvah. So now that's the topic sentence. We don't yet understand that. Originally, before his brother married the woman, he could have married her if he wanted. When the brother married her, she became forbidden. Then she becomes permitted again when the brother dies without children. You would have thought she'd go back to the way it was originally, the way he could have married her originally. Therefore, it says, no. Means mitzvah. What does this braita mean? So first explanation is like this. Montana. So who's the Tana? This braita matches Abba Shaul. How so? Mitzvah means like this. Any man wants to marry any woman, he can do it for whatever reason he wants. Obviously, she has to agree, but right, he can do it whatever motivation he has for marrying her. Once she becomes forbidden, right? Because the brother married. Then he can't just marry her if he wanted. Then it became permitted because the brother died without children. You might have thought it could go back to the way it was originally. You can marry her for any reason you want. You can only do it for the sake of the mitzvah. So it doesn't go back to the way it was originally. You could do it for any reason you want, and now you can't anymore. That's the first one. I'm going to read this also according to Rabbanit. How does it work? Every person has an option. If he wants, not why is he marrying her, but can he marry her or can he not, right? Any man can decide. Again, the woman has to agree, but he can choose a woman of his choice, okay? And we can choose, I don't want to marry this woman if I don't want to. Then she became forbidden to him. He didn't have that choice anymore because she was married to his brother. She becomes then permitted again. He could maybe marry her, maybe not. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. What do you mean he can't? He has to marry her. He has to do the mitzvah of Yibum. What do you mean? You can't just ignore her. He now has a mitzvah upon him. What it meant was, his choice is, I could do Yibum or I could do Chalitza. Talmud Lomar, you might have thought he has a choice. Talmud Lomar, Yevamot yavo aleha mitzvah. Then it tells you, well, what it's trying to tell you is the ideal is to do Yibum. Yes, you have a choice, but your ideal is to do Yibum. But then this has absolutely nothing to do with what your motivation is, because your motivation could be anything. It's just a matter of what changed. It's that you now have an obligation to do Yibum rather than it just being a choice. Okay, it's like a much stronger choice. You're really supposed to do it this way, and better do Yibum than to do Chalitza and not actually marry her. Okay, so this, again, we don't have time to go into it more, but this has a lot of interesting things about what the issues are, what's better to do, what's worse to do. Can you do it? Can you do it for any reason? Or do you have to be motivated just to do it for the sake of the mitzvah? Again, what that is going to mean for their marriage down the road is a good question, which the Gemara doesn't seem to address. Anyway, a lot of interesting issues that came up today. And in terms of questions, I know people were asking in the beginning, who does Yibum? You saw the whole thing about the order, the brother, then this and that. Anyway, wishing everybody a Chag Kasher V'Sameach and good luck with getting all the dapim in with all the chagim, etc. I'll try to do my best to help you out. Okay, like I said, next week, I'll also put up the dapim early. So people who want to get ahead, especially it's 2 days, even for those in Israel. So I'll put them up earlier. Have a Chag Sameach and a Shabbat Shalom.